Hello and welcome to a new episode of KET Talks. I am Vincent and I will be your host today, joined by my colleague Rémy Bonny, the Executive Director of Forbidden Colors. Hello Rémy, are you ready for our last KET Talks of 2022?
Yes, of course. I'm really looking forward to the end of the year.
In this episode, we will discuss the situation of LGBTIQ+ people in Poland, as we are joined by Dominik Kuc, a local activist who has been working in the past years on inclusive education in Poland. Dominik, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for joining.
Well, if everybody is ready, let's start. For our first topic, we'll talk about the ranking of high schools in Poland according to their level of inclusivity for LGBTIQ+ people. This is a project that Dominik, you initiated a few years ago in Warsaw and which was supported this year by the Brussels Capital Region through Forbidden Colors. Can you explain first what is this project and how it started?
Couple years ago, there were few very huge media discussed cases of the suicide of young teenagers in Poland that unfortunately committed suicide because of their sexual orientation. I was still in high school at that time. We were discussing what we could do to prevent this from happening because the situation is tough in Poland. The right-wing government is anti-LGBTQ openly, and the education ministry is not supporting the community in schools at all. So we were thinking about how to give a safe space for those who are probably discovering their identity or their sexual orientation, for those who did not come out in the middle school. The LGBTQ-friendly school ranking is a project that, first of all, helps young people to choose the safe, open and acceptant school for LGBTQ community. So the people who are young and looking for a safe space in Poland, they can, according to our list, choose a high school that will be friendly for them. The schools are assessed by the students themselves. So each year, the students in Poland vote for the school, whether the school is LGBTQ friendly or not, whether the same-sex pair can go on a prom together, whether the teachers are inclusive and tolerant towards LGBTQ community, whether they are using correct pronouns for transgender persons, whether the school organizes anti-discriminatory workshops, and so on and so on. And the top 10 of them is rewarded with equality diplomas and the Science Safe School, which are openly hang out on the wall of the school so that everyone can know that the school is open and inclusive. This year we had over 15,000 of responses. The idea of the ranking was very appropriate to not only show the safe spaces for young people, but also influence the whole education system, because then we push the schools to be more tolerant towards the minority, and those schools that actually a bit compete each year for the prizes are doing something that is a great job in Poland.
So in the process, you started slow in Warsaw, and how did it grow? Because you started only with high school locally around where you were living, but now it's a nationwide initiative and project. How all of that happened?
Well, first of all, it was only Warsaw, but only in Warsaw, almost every school from the city has participated. And in Warsaw, we had 4,200 participants in the first edition of the ranking. I did not expect this kind of engagement because I was thinking that it is hard to push people into assessing their own schools, but actually they wanted to express their opinions. And after the very first edition of the ranking, many other cities also expressed their interest into having the project. It was the time when we started the cooperation with Forbidden Colors to create the website, because it is something that even during COVID could be done. We created a website where every high school is put into the assessment. So the young people can remotely vote for the school on the website. actually we got a lot of support from the local communities outside of Warsaw, the cities like Poznań or Województwo Lubuskie, which probably you don't know, but these are the regions in Poland, and we also want to be very active with them. It is not only about the biggest cities, but also about the other regions and the smaller communities. And actually the school that won in 2021 was a school in Dąbrowa Górnicza, the southern Poland, which we have not expected.
And I think that's also where you see where this project actually makes so much difference. We have seen a lot of attacks by the government, as you have been explaining, against the LGBTIQ plus community in Poland over the last 2-3 years. But with your project, you're also showing and breaking their narrative, because the Polish government is always saying, oh, look, these LGBTQ people, they only exist in the west of Europe, they only exist in our big liberal cities. But this also shows that LGBTQ people exist in the smallest areas of Poland, in the countryside, which are considered to be conservative and so on. So it's also showing and breaking the narrative of the government.
And the government and the Ministry of Education have never commented on the results of the ranking. They probably do not know how to comment on the result. However, the municipalities did, and each time, even in these kind of smaller towns or countryside, the municipalities are standing with the schools, because actually, of course, Polish education system is correlated with the municipalities. These are the organs that are contributing to the education. Minister of Education, Przemysław Czarnek, has expressed many times his opinion on LGBTQ rights and called the LGBTQ students the ideology and something that should be thrown out of the school, which we strongly do not agree, of course.
Have you seen an evolution in the process in the last years? Do you think that this project has had a strong impact? What is your feeling? Because you said you were surprised by some results, so also you didn't expect some of the things you see. How do you reflect on all of that?
Sure, I haven't expected that it will be a real criterion for young people to choose the school. But actually, after a few years of repeating the survey, of repeating the ranking, there are more and more people that are saying that I was choosing my school 3 years ago and I was choosing it according to the LGBTQ friendly school ranking, because I wanted to be not only in a school that is okay with final exams that I know that I will pass, but also in a school when I will learn in the environment of safety and openness, because you learn better if you are in a safe community.
Do you think that this survey also shows that there is a strong evolution in Poland in terms of mentalities, that this young generation, these high school students that are participating in the ranking and looking at this ranking, it shows that they are expecting something more than what the government is selling at the moment?
Oh, of course, 90% of students in high school know at least one open LGBTQ person in their own school. So it is almost everyone that knows LGBTQ classmate. So the visibility is very high, and 76% of them see regularly the signs correlated to LGBTQ community, like stickers, like posters. So it is very high. Even for Poland, young people are very progressive in our country. But at the same time, the teachers and the school education system are not progressive that much and are not ready for this change, because actually only 20% of them organize Rainbow Fridays or workshops or events. On one hand, we have Generation Z, which is right now in the schooling system very progressive, and for them LGBTQ rights are just standard rights, how it should be. And on the other hand, we have the older generation that is still either a bit conservative, either a bit afraid.
Rémy, Forbidden Colors even decided this year to launch a pilot similar to the one in Poland to rank high schools in Brussels. Can you tell us more about this pilot project?
Yes, of course, Vincent. Like Dominik has been explaining over the last 2 years, Forbidden Colors and Growspace have been working closely together on the LGBTIQ plus friendly school ranking in Poland, and we've learned that what Dominik is doing is very much a good practice also for other countries in Europe. So, in cooperation with some members of the European Parliament from the wide political spectrum, we have been talking on how we should bring this to other European countries. But to show already towards European policymakers that this LGBTIQ plus friendly school ranking from Poland also works in other regions in Europe, we basically want to do the pilot project in Brussels, because of course the situation in Poland is totally different than the situation in Brussels. Poland is considered as a country where there are almost no legal rights for LGBTIQ plus persons, and Belgium is considered as one of the best in Europe for LGBTIQ plus persons. At the same time, we know the demographics from Poland and Brussels particularly are very, very different. So that's why we thought it was very interesting to bring this to Brussels. So then we did a pilot project in 10 schools in Brussels in cooperation with Deloitte, the consultancy firm, where we went to 10 schools to do the survey also in Brussels and to find the most inclusive school. And we found that also in Brussels there is still a lot of work to do. And that's also again showing why this ranking is so interesting, because yes, also in Brussels there is a lot to do, but a lot of policymakers actually think that there is not so much to do anymore, because Belgium is ranked in things like the ILGA Europe rainbow map as one of the best countries in the world. So that gives them the wrong idea, I think, that although that legally speaking we might be one of the best in the world, that they don't have to do anything anymore. But as we have seen here in Brussels, there's still also in the schools a lot of work to do. So for our next topic, we will be discussing a few new law proposals that are at this moment in the Polish Parliament. First of all, we have the Stop LGBT bill. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about that, Dominik?
Stop LGBTQ bill is a law proposed by the right-wing organizations that will actually prohibit the pride parades in the cities in Poland, and that is against the LGBTQ ideology. And actually in the text of the law, this term is openly used by right-wing organizations. The pride marches still take place in the very different parts of the country, and it is because the pride parades in Poland are taking place right now not only in the biggest cities but also in a very small towns. Each year we have higher and higher number of those marches in smaller and smaller cities. So the opposition is getting more active towards LGBTQ rights and visibility. So I, of course, hope that this law will not be discussed anymore.
Yeah, so basically the law was approved by the first reading in the parliament. Now it's going into the committees, but at some point they will have to vote on these, right?
The law in the Polish legislation system can be kept in the committee very long. For example, same-sex partnerships, it was also put into the committee and then not voted for a couple of years. So I feel very ashamed that this kind of law is discussed seriously in the Polish parliament, because actually voting is one thing, because we do not know whether they will do it. But the other thing is a public debate that were very harsh last year, and that the strong conservatives were discussing the LGBTQ ideology in the Polish parliament. I mean, it is something that should never have happened. Of course, the opposition was mobilized and voted against the bill, but I am strongly convinced that this kind of voices from the Polish parliament give the very negative impact for the society and are showing the bad examples, because then you have the violence on the streets, then you have the violence in schools, and the people that are causing this cases are just feeling okay because they justify their behavior with what they have had from the parliament.
So next to the Stop LGBT bill, we also have another bill that is currently in the Polish parliament, the Lex Czarnek, the education reform bill, which is also targeting LGBTIQ plus organizations.
Yes, Lex Czarnek is targeting all organizations to be banned from work with schools. So the organization will have to get an approval from the education superintendent, which is basically the ministry, to be able to have workshops, meetings in the school for the students. And of course, it is for all the organizations to have the approval, but the organizations from the public administration will not have this kind of obligation. So we are, of course, convinced that it is the law that is, of course, against the controversial topics like LGBTQ rights, civic rights, or any kind of critical thinking in schools. And the law was first discussed and voted by the parliament, but there was a veto in March by the President Duda because of the start of the war in Ukraine. He was not willing to divide the society, as he wrote. But right now we are after the third reading of Lex Czarnek 2. And right now we are afraid that the President will sign the law this time. There are many protests, even today in Warsaw, people are protesting against this education law.
So this will automatically also influence your project, the LGBTQ-friendly school ranking, right? Because this is basically a list that the government can use to learn which schools are LGBTQ-friendly and which are not.
Well, we are not having workshops with each schools, not having the events inside the schools, but for example outside. So let's say formally we are not affected, but of course it creates a freezing effect that many schools will be afraid of organizing any kind of events. Many schools will be afraid to talk with us. It will be just the constant control for the principal. So it will be very difficult to do something.
I think a lot of our listeners have heard about what we call LGBT free zones. So it's something that started in 2019, as some parts in Poland have been declaring themselves free from LGBTI ideology or LGBTI people. Can you explain a little bit more what it means and what is happening or has been happening in Poland since 2019?
Of course, after the approval of the City of Warsaw LGBTQ chart, many other municipalities declared themselves as LGBTQ-free zones, which is declarative because, of course, it is against Polish constitution, so it does not have the effect, for example, on how the council will work. It is the declarative document that is stating that the part of the citizens that are living in this kind of municipalities are not welcomed. And of course, it has a strong impact on the local communities, because even if it's not influencing the council's work or the future local legislation, it is impacting the society because first of all, you show the justification of the violence. If there is any kind of violence in the city, well, the police says that of course we are LGBTQ free zone and you should, for example, not keep your hands if you are a same-sex pair. Or for example, the teachers that are saying openly during classrooms for the students that would like to discuss their rights that we are in LGBTQ free zones, we cannot talk about the LGBTQ rights and we are against. At some point, 1/3 of the country was declared as LGBTQ free zone because many regional municipalities were having this kind of charts. After the European Commission's intervention, this zone has diminished.
Rémy, can you tell us more about what has happened in Brussels regarding the LGBT-free zones in Poland?
Yeah, I think Dominik has been explaining it very clearly. Indeed, it was a top-down thing. I remember in the beginning when indeed Trzaskowski, the mayor of Warsaw, announced his LGBTQ equality charter, that the right-wing, far-right sect cult or the Yuri is one of those organizations that we here at Forbidden Colors also monitor very very closely in our work to monitor the anti-gender movements, has been to, from village to village in Poland, to convince them to adopt these anti-LGBTQ charters, to adopt these LGBT-free zones. However, the European institutions have taken a closer look at what is happening in Poland, and they found that these LGBT-free zones are obviously a breach of EU law. So they have announced an infringement procedure years ago already against Poland because of these LGBT-free zones. There has been a lot of communication between the Polish government, between the voivodeships, between all of these local entities. And at some point, when the European Commission was going to approve the recovery fund, so the money that goes to the Polish government to tackle the economic backlashes on COVID-19, they basically said to these voivodeships who declared themselves LGBTQ free zones, you can only get the money when you actually abolish your anti-LGBTQ resolutions. 4 out of 5 of the voivodeships actually have done that, and that's how actually the European Commission has put some pressure on Poland. At the same time, we see that the European Commission is lacking behind a bit on the follow-up on all of this, because yes, indeed, in comparison with 2019 and 2020, when all of the LGBTQ free zones were announced, back then we had over 130 local entities declaring them as LGBTQ free zones. Today we still have 54 who are declared LGBTQ free zones. So yes, there has been a diminishing of the LGBTQ free zones, but there still are 54 in the country, and it looks like the European Commission has given up on them. We know that the recovery fund has been released. We know that the cohesion funds are being released at the moment, although there are a few milestones, but these milestones are not regarding LGBTQ rights. So it looks like more and more like the European Commission has actually given up on LGBTQ people on the Polish countryside.
Dominik, given what we have been talking about, what is your view on the current situation in Poland for LGBTIQ plus people? Do you think that things will evolve toward a better inclusion of LGBTIQ plus people? What are your fears or your hopes for the future?
First of all, the key is the election next year. There is a very big disruption right now in the Polish public debate, because on the one hand we have, of course, the politicians that are conservative and that are not willing to put LGBTQ rights into the agenda. But on the other hand, we have the civic society that is very active. Many of the people that were hesitating a couple years ago, 7 years ago, before the right-wing government has started, are right now strongly approving the same-sex partnerships, marriage equality, and even the adoption. So I think that this having a very good hope for the next years, and the society is becoming more and more open and more educated. It is not yet represented in the parliament and in the ministries, and many people, of course, feel right now ashamed of the image that the country has outside of its borders. So I think if the opposition wins, there will be a great chance to also influence the legal changes in Poland. Our society is ready. Our politicians are not yet.
The previous government, the government before the right-wing government that we had now, was a government led by the Civic Platform. Back then we had as Prime Minister our good friend here from Brussels, Donald Tusk, who was the president of the European Council until a few years ago. Now he is back in Poland to run for presidency next year. Well, last time he didn't want to vote, let's put it like that, on introducing a civil partnership for same-gender couples. Why would he be willing to do that now?
Because his own electorate has changed, and it is something that is not yet visible outside, but is something that you can feel when you are in the demonstrations, in the civil movement in Poland, that are the supporters of the civic coalition right now. From the very beginning, the rainbow flags were present on every demonstration, and right now the electorate of the civic platform that was hesitating is more and more progressive and is putting much more pressure on its own party to vote for the partnerships and marriage equality. It has changed also concerning the young people. There was a survey, the results of which was published in Polish Newsweek, stating that the youth organization of Civic Platform is like 90% of them supports marriage equality and adoption. So it is something that was not the case 10 years ago, but I hope, of course, it will come to the execution to these rights by Civic Platform.
Thank you very much, Dominik, for joining our KET Talks today. You can find more information about Forbidden Colors online at forbidden-colors.com, and don't forget to check the website of KET Magazine for all the news about queer lives in Brussels. We will be back in 2023 now with more KET Talks. Until then, happy holiday season and thanks for listening.